From the New York Times, I'm Anna Martin.
Love now and
Did you follow my
Love is stronger than anything.
You feel in love with love.
And I love you more than anything.
There's still love. Love.
Today on Modern Love.
We ended up sitting on a bench outside the bakery, and that's where he told me. I never went back to that bakery. They also had bad service, but it was mostly the divorce thing, I would say.
Stories about divorce.
When my dad started sleeping in the basement. I didn't think much of it at the time.
From the people who had no say in it.
I was 7 when I realized that my parents were divorced. I knew that we would never be a family again.
The kids.
But I would just ask, like, well, whose house are we going to? And whether I was asking my mom or my dad, I would be like, darn, even though I was lying to them because I wanted to be with both of them. But just to emphasize, like, I'm sad leaving you.
Everyone processes this kind of change differently.
You know, everyone wants to believe that their parents can end up together.
I wasn't surprised. I just was at peace.
But it leaves an impact.
All those years later, it hit me again when I had my own family, and suddenly things were hard and onerous.
We asked Modern Love listeners to share the moment you knew your parents were really getting a divorce. And we're going to hear more of your stories about what that moment meant to you later on in the show. But first, Natalie Muñoz is 18 years old now, and she has the distinct honor of being the youngest person to ever write a Modern Love essay. Natalie, how old were you when you wrote your essay?
It was July of 2020 was when I started it, so I just turned 15.
15.
Yeah.
Okay, can you read some of your essay for me?
Of course. I refused to accept that my parents' divorce was happening. I would drag my feet when my mother or father went to open houses and real estate agents' offices. I truly believed that I was going to get home that night to them making dinner together in the kitchen. They would smile and say, "Sorry we worried you, sweetie, but everything's fine now." It wasn't until they each had bought separate houses and sold half of our furniture that I realized this fantasy was never going to turn into reality. And as soon as this two-house life became permanent, my hope quickly turned into envy. I would see my friends at the end of the school day greeted by both parents. And during the 6th grade science fair, I had to transport my unfinished volcano from one house to the other. But the other kids could leave theirs untouched and permanently installed in their basement or garage, waiting to be worked on again.
I can almost see you carting that volcano from home to home. That must have been tricky.
Yeah, and I think it caused me to procrastinate on it because I remember it wasn't done until the night before.
Did it look good when you ultimately finished it?
I thought it looked really good, and it worked.
That's very impressive. Okay, so tell me about a typical weekly schedule in the early years of your parents' divorce. What did it look like to live between your mom's house and your dad's house?
My parents chose to do 50-50. So 50% of the year spent with my mom, 50% of the year spent with my dad. And what that means specifically, though, is a couple days at one house, and then I would switch every Sunday. And it's knowing that you're going from one environment to the next. And, there's things that you say in this house or you do in this house that you don't do in the other house for whatever reason. At my mom's house, I was never allowed to eat in my room or something like that. And my dad's house, he doesn't really care. And so it's little things like that where it's you kind of sometimes may have to stop yourself. You're I want to go get a snack and eat in my room. Oh, wait.
Wrong house.
Wrong house.
How would it feel when you did those things?
It was a little jarring and also just a little making a stupid mistake. It makes you realize that there is this definite line.
Very distinct. You said that it was a stupid mistake. Did you feel like you were doing something wrong when you did something in one house that you weren't supposed to?
Sometimes it was I should know better because I feel like I should know my parents better. I should know that that's the expectation. I often feel that kids going through divorce sometimes don't get the grace that they maybe deserve or the slack they maybe deserve. I think you look at divorce statistics and everyone will be half of marriages end in divorce. And so therefore that's kind of serves as justification for kids are so used to it because it happens so often means that it shouldn't be that big of a deal. But I don't think you can diminish something just because it happens a lot.
Yeah, I'm just thinking about, younger you carting this volcano from house to house. I mean, that's a lot of responsibility. It's a lot to keep track of, even kind of purely logistically, to go back to this switch day on Sundays at 10 a.m., you had to make sure you had all your stuff with you, right?
Yeah, that's still a battle I'm fighting.
Really? Tell me more about that.
Think about when you go on vacation, right? And you leave something at home. Think about how hard, how annoying that is, right? Like, I've done that. Like, I remember I was in, somewhere and I left my swimsuit at a hotel.
Oh.
And I was going from, one city to the next and I needed that swimsuit. And so it's imagine doing that, but imagine if I forget my laptop charger at my mom's house, I can't do my homework. I think I remember crying because, I was in middle school or something, and I was going to be allowed to go to the mall without my parents, with just my friends.
Yeah, that's huge.
And I wanted to wear this very specific, Abercrombie and Fitch shirt, and I left it at my dad's house or something, and I couldn't get it. And it doesn't seem like a big deal, but, this is my shirt. Why can't I have it? Because I own it. Why can't I use it?
Was there some anger there? I'm hearing a little bit of anger in your voice.
Yeah, I mean, it does feel angering at times because it's people will make the argument, just buy two of everything. Well, that's not possible, right?
Right.
I was excited to present myself in this way, and I can't now. And that's really disappointing.
It's not about the shirts. It's about your sense of who you are.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, okay, you wrote your essay when you were 15 years old, figuring out how to live between your mom's house and your dad's house. But now you're 18, which is huge because it means you're not legally bound by your parents' custody agreement anymore. What does that open up for you? What does that allow you to do?
I'm not bound by that agreement anymore. If I decided, hey, I want to go on this vacation with my mom, I don't have to ask my dad for permission per se. I would let him know because I want to be respectful of his time and his, feelings. But the reality I've come to is that you can't split yourself into equal pieces with people. It may not be a 50-50 split anymore. And that's going to be okay. There's a triangle. It's what is my mom's life doing? What is my dad's life doing? And what is my life doing? But I think I'm the peak of the triangle. And I'm trying to prioritize myself a little bit more. I wasn't able to celebrate my dad's 50th birthday with him. Which,
really?
Yeah, it just didn't work out. And that's really hard. But you can't be everywhere at once. And that's something that, I think I've had to learn the past 9 years. You cannot be everywhere at once.
You're going to college soon, right? And then you really won't be around. You're a high school senior, 18. Have you decided where you're going to school?
I just committed this week to UCLA.
Oh my God.
Cognitive science.
How will going to college, going to UCLA change your living situation?
So I'll be moving there. And I think I'm mostly scared because I explained to my mom, because she was saying, she's you're an only child, and I'm worried that you will not be used to living with other people, in a dorm, roommates.
Right.
And I explained to her, I was but it's going to be so nice to have one key, right? One bed, one key. It's something that I'll be able to say, no matter what kind of day I've had, I know I'm going to come back to my dorm and be in the same bed every day.
Natalie, thank you for talking to me today.
Thank you so much for having me on. It means so much that even anyone would want to talk to me about this stuff.
I could talk to you for 14 more hours, but I don't want to eat up your spring break.
14 more hours.
After the break, your stories.
I wanted to talk a little bit about when I realized that my parents were divorced.
The moment I realized.
The moment I actually realized that my life had changed for good.
Everything's going to change for good.
The divorce was real.
When it truly hit home was when my dad finally moved out.
A kid on the playground, and he yelled out. My mom read it in the paper.
My mother moved from her bedroom with my dad.
Yeah, that day that my grandpa came to pick us up from the after-school program and told us that our parents were in court.
We weren't supposed to hear the argument. I was in the other room with my girlfriend at the time.
And my mom was not at my graduation.
That was when it really hit me.
I'm Soraya. I live in Sacramento, California, and I am 17. I was either 12 or 13 when my parents got divorced. So the day my dad told me that he was leaving us, my mom looked very upset and had clearly been crying, and my dad looked just solemn. So he told us that, they were going on a break or something. And my sister immediately ran and hid. And I just stood there and challenged him. I was like, why would you leave? Why do you think it would work better if we weren't a unit? So I decided that I had to do something to get him to see and hear me. And so I went downstairs. I pull out this massive red Nerf gun. And I strapped this gun around my waist. Just a few months before, we were having Nerf gun battles all over the house. And I just thought that if the tears weren't enough, if the words weren't enough, then seeing his child carry this enormous Nerf gun and say, if you don't stay, then I'll shoot you with Nerf bullets. And I pushed my dad into where we do the laundry, put my back on the door and said, you can't leave, because just stay and talk it out, it's not that hard. And my mom was just in Farsi, please just let go, it's gonna be okay, just let go. And I hate letting go, so if my mom told me to stop, then I had to let go.
My name is David Scott. I live in Columbus, Ohio. The moment I realized my parents were divorced, I was 11.
I was 12 years old when my parents divorced.
13 years
16
old.
years old. Senior year of high school. 2 years ago when I was 31.
My father had abandoned us. And then one day, he and his mother, my grandmother, walk into our house in Columbus, and I'll never forget his voice saying, Lucy wants to get a divorce, referring to my mother. I'll never forget the sound of his voice. That's when I knew.
My name is Nicole Harrison, and I live in Rome, Georgia. My parents got divorced when I was 8 going on 9. One day, I was at my father's house. It was a beautiful sunny day. I can remember the asphalt being hot and my father sitting next to me and saying, so I need to ask you, do you want to live with me or your mother? And I think at that moment, all of a sudden, the problems of the adults became my problem. And I can remember losing my breath and my stomach just dropping, thinking, if I choose him, my mother will be so hurt. And if I choose my mother, this man, I'm going to hurt his feelings. And I thought of my little sister, and I thought of my home, my bedroom, my stuff, and it was with my mom. And I said, I think Mom. And then I remember the coldness. And I can remember at that moment feeling hot in my throat and just realizing my relationship had changed with him. And he just got up and walked away. And I was left sitting there in my bathing suit on a towel on a really hot summer day. And my whole life had changed.
This is Clay from Toronto, Canada. The moment I realized that my parents were really divorced was probably about 6 to 9 months after they actually got divorced. My mom and I were living alone in the house, and my girlfriend, now fiance, and I went out for dinner. Midway through dinner, my mom calls me and tells me that her closest friend in the world just dropped dead in her home and ended up driving my mom to her friend's apartment, and there were police cars there and caution tape and everything like that. My mom's hysterical, bawling her eyes out, of course. And, she gets out of the car, and it was at that moment that, it all just snapped into place for me. Here is this responsibility that's kind of now on me to, consider how my parents are feeling. This past chapter in my life of being a family and feeling together is now gone, and this new kind of chaos has started.
I typed in mom and dad's house to Google Maps, and I went on autopilot and just started driving back to my dad's place. And I realized in that moment that it's actually not mom and dad's house anymore. It's actually just dad's house. And I realized that I was actually supposed to go to my mom's that night.
And the question always is, for me to this day, is where is home? Because my home will always be split.
My name is Ann Albright, and I grew up in Bedford, New York. I was 9 years old in 1964, and one of the biggest things on the front page of the newspapers was the fight between Cassius Clay and Sonny Liston. We know Cassius Clay today as Muhammad Ali, but this was a boxing match of unparalleled status. And seeing a newspaper that said Clay versus Liston made a big impact because one was going to be a winner and one was going to be a loser. That's the whole point of something like Versus. Someone in the boxing match was going to end up on the ground and someone was going to end up with a raised fist. I was home from school one day, and the thing I loved about the kitchen in the house where I grew up is that it had a linoleum floor, dark blue, with white swirls in it. So it was very common for me to get the wicker laundry basket and sit in the middle of the kitchen floor and pretend I was at sea. And the kitchen phone was Mom's base of operations. So it was a very familiar scenario for me to be puttering around in my wicker basket while she was on the phone in the kitchen. And on this particular day, my mother was sitting talking to her attorney. And spread out in front of her were all the papers from the separation agreement. And I walked over to see what she was looking at, and I saw her name versus his name. I mean, I still remember my stomach falling. I did not want them to be Clay and Liston. There was a brutality to Versus that, it was like an earthquake. I couldn't imagine why people who were parents would be that adversarial.
The moment that I realized my parents were really divorced was 6 years before they actually got divorced.
I really don't remember my parents ever getting along.
Knowing that my parents were not meant to be together.
My parents are two completely different people, and to say I could never imagine them married is an understatement.
My parents' relationship showed me what I didn't want.
They were miserable.
And it all started to make sense. The griping, the fighting, the disconnection. And I was like, oh, okay, my parents are going to get divorced eventually.
I felt mostly relief.
For me, it was the first time that I realized your parents are also just people.
My name is Dorca Penix. My friends call me Dee. I live in Hartsdale, New York with my husband and 2 kids. My parents got divorced when I was about 13, almost 14 years old. My parents were not a good fit. I don't remember them really being truly happy together. We didn't have a lot of freedom. My parents were always super concerned about us playing outside. And my dad worked a lot of hours as a cab driver. So we weren't allowed to go outside, and we weren't allowed to be loud inside because we might wake up my dad. The day that my mom told me that she was going to divorce my dad, I didn't believe that it was going to happen. I do remember the day that it became real for me was the day that we packed. And it was a tiny one bedroom with not even a window in the kitchen. We were super tired and we wanted to quit. And my mom said, you know what? Let's just jump on the bed. And I was like, what do you mean? Let's just be loud and jump on the bed. And we all got up. We took my younger sister, Ashley. We put her like in the middle and we just jumped around her up and down, and just laughing and dancing. I'm pretty sure we had music on because, of course, we're from the Dominican Republic. We have to have music wherever you go. And it just felt really real. I felt safe. I felt happy. I felt that there was a chance for me to be me. And like the past 3 years was just kind of a version of me, a quieted version of me. And when we moved out and knowing that my parents were not going to be together, I felt like it was a more full version of happy me.
And that was the moment.
That was the moment.
Yeah, that was the moment I realized my parents' divorce was actually happening.
That life is different.
That's what I realized.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thanks for listening.
Thanks for listening, guys.
Thank you. Have a good day, night, morning, evening. Bye.
Bye.
Okay, bye.
A huge thank you to everyone who sent us their stories of divorce. We really appreciate it. If you want to submit a story to Modern Love, you can head to nytimes.com/modernlovesubmission. Modern Love is produced by Julia Botero, Christina Josa, and Hans Butow. It's edited by Sarah Saracen. Our executive producer is Jen Poyant. This episode was mixed by Sophia Landman, and our show was recorded by Maddie Masiello. The Modern Love theme music is by Dan Powell. Original music in this episode by Sonia Herrero, Marian Lozano, Pat McCusker, and Carol Sabaro. Digital production by Nell Gologli. The Modern Love column is edited by Daniel Jones. Mia Lee is the editor of Modern Love Projects. I'm Anna Martin. Thanks for listening.